What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Geek Pantheon. I am Eric, and today I wanted to talk about something that has been sweeping through the TTRPG scene. Obviously, tools like ChatGPT and Claude have flooded the space to assist game masters in prepping and running their games. These tools are alleviating a lot of the anxiety that some people have around running a game for their tables. If you use them to great effect and you feel like it isn't having any negative impact on your games, then that's great. All the other issues surrounding the potentials of AI and where that data comes from aside, I'm not here to dunk on anybody that is using those tools to alleviate the stress that comes with running a game. However, I wanted to use this video to provide an alternative to a common use case that I see a lot of game masters make use of AI for, and that is giving your magic items a backstory. Fans of the channel will know that I am a huge fan of random tables and making use of them in my games because they force me into interesting corners and get my creative juices flowing. And I know some other game masters out there absolutely hate random tables. They hate random encounters, all those things. But I will argue that this particular use case of random tables will be useful for all GMs because it's less about injecting randomness into your game and more about randomness into your planning. So as opposed to going into ChatGPT or another large language model and just typing out, hey, I'm going to give my player a +1 longsword, give me a cool backstory for it. This gives you the ability to still have some assistance, you not having to come up with it all on your own, but still allowing your unique voice to come through when it comes time to actually create these stories within your game. So I'm going to take you through 3 levels of using random tables to inject meaning into notable items at your table. Level 1, roll in the moment and go with it. So you're at your table and your players have sprung an encounter that you didn't plan for. They're investigating a building that you did not map out. They went south when you planned for them to go north. You know, players being players. And now you have a reason to give out some loot, a sword or a magic wand, but where did it come from? Who had it before it was found on the ground? Roll for it. So all of these levels are going to start with one baseline random table, and that is factions. Sly Flourish has a D100 table of Eberron factions that I use 2 or 3 times a week when I'm planning for my various games. There's one also that he has for Forgotten Realms on his site. I'll put links to both of them down below if I remember. But if you are playing in a different setting or your own homebrew, then I would take a couple of hours at the most and write a list of all the various factions of your world. Religions, guilds, demigods, nations, etc. If someone can have an allegiance to it, write it down. We ideally are shooting for 100 items on the list, so get creative with it. Include schools, gangs, and other planes of existence. Now that you have that, level 1 is easy. Roll on your table. That is where the item came from. In the world of Eberron, if my player is investigating a building in the city of Sharn that I didn't plan on, and they ask if they find any weapons in a room because I just said, yeah, there's a weapon rack in the corner, I can roll on the table. Now, full disclosure, I'm going to be doing some practical applications of these levels here in the video. I did genuinely roll randomly, but I rolled when I was writing the script. So I'm not going to like fake it for you all and roll dice and be like, I rolled this. Let me check the table real quick. I'm some trust here. I genuinely rolled randomly on these tables. I did not pre-plan any of these, but I am going to tell you what I rolled, what I got on the table, and then my thought process that came after it. So in this instance, I got a 74, which is the Sulatar Drow. That is the make and design of this weapon. Sulatar Drow are a specific type of Drow in the Eberron setting, and they master the elements specifically around fire, and they have lineage going back to an ancient giant empire. That's all things that my players might or might not know. I can explain to them, but the bigger question is, what is it doing in this random building in Sharn? Not my problem right now, because all I've done is introduce a mystery to my session, but I don't need to have the answer yet. I should probably come up with it between sessions if it's a larger mystery that I want my players exploring. Or guess what? Now I have another piece of the puzzle that I'm trying to frantically put together as my players are actively investigating this building. So instead of it being this greater mystery, it's just, why is there a Sulatar Drow sword on this weapon rack? Well, probably because there's a group of Sulatar Drow in this building hiding out, or they were here, but they ran off for some reason. This one dice roll has given me a lot of different options for this session and a direction to move forward. And this can just inject a lot of flavor. And in fact, you don't even need to ask that question. If you roll on this table and you say, oh yeah, there is a sword over there. It's actually a scimitar. It looks to be made of obsidian. It's like a black blade that consumes light, but you see red veins going throughout the metal that glow with red and orange fire. And somebody makes a roll to figure out what the heck sword is this. And if they roll high enough, then you could say, oh, you can tell that this is from the Sulatar Drow down in Zendrick. Then they're going to be the ones to ask the question. They're going to be the ones to start theorizing and positing, what could this mean? And then you just get to pick which of their theories is right, or roll off of it with your own idea after you hear what they think. Level 2, roll a few times beforehand and then craft a story. So let's say you're prepping for your next session. You want a really cool magic item to give one of your players. In reality, it's going to be a +1 weapon with some interesting property, but you want it to really jump off the table with an interesting story. How do you come up with something? Well, you roll on your D100 table, but this time we're going to roll 4 times. Now, there are 2 ways of doing this, so you can kind of call this entry level 2A and 2B. I'm going to explain how I use it for maximum creativity, and then I'll explain how you can use it in a bit of a safer way if you don't want as much chaos in your game prep. So for this weapon's backstory, the first number I roll is going to be who the weapon belonged to. The second number I roll is going to be who they were fighting. The third number is going to be where they were fighting. And the fourth number is going to be an unlikely ally that assisted them. So for this magic weapon, my first roll is a 69. Swear to God, nice. And that is Sarlona. Sarlona is a continent in Eberron. Lots of psionics within the culture. There's a lot of interesting stuff with Sarlona. So our weapon wielder and the weapon being from there is super cool and will provide us a lot of different materials to work with. Second roll is 51, which is Korovar, which is the culture of half-elves in Eberron, kind of their distinct identity. Third is 47, which is House Thorani, which is the Dragonmarked house of entertainment and assassination. And lastly is 53, which is Kyber, which is the Underdark, the underworld demiplanes. So that's wild in terms of an unlikely ally. So let's start working through this. Sarlona has a large culture of changelings on it, and the ribbon weave is a really iconic weapon in changeling culture. So let's make this a +1 ribbon weave with some kind of psionic ability, which will honestly vary based on what system you're using. So I'm not going to get into the specifics of that, but it's easy enough for you to think through, if you know the system, what makes sense for a psionic ability, and then being sure to flavor it as something psionic. This changeling was fighting the Korovar, which is so broad that actually makes this kind of difficult. So I'm thinking a specific Korovar that wronged them in some way. So let's say a pirate captain that was a Korovar that killed their family. Simple and iconic. And they fought them all the way from Sarlona to House Thorani. So once again, this is interesting because it's not necessarily a place that has an iconic location. But in the city of Stormreach, House Thorani has a brothel that they run for the elite and wealthy. It's very expensive, very secretive. So it makes sense that this would be an iconic quest to just even find it and then ultimately fight and potentially kill this Korovar pirate captain. Which brings us to our unlikely ally, Kyber, the Underdark. So that tells me this changeling didn't take a ship from Sarlona to Stormreach. They journeyed through Kyber. They went through the Underdark for some reason. And because this is such a vast part of the world, let's pick a specific spot in Kyber that relates to our story. And we're going to go with Arak Yor. The city of Arak Yor rises from within a vast chasm. Its humanoid dwellings surround alien spires and pod-like structures of mind flayer design. Now, it's long abandoned, but legends speak of a powerful being, neither Delkir nor Overlord, that is imprisoned atop the central spire. And it's so maddeningly powerful that it drove even the Illithids to abandon the city. And so the abandoned city is now occupied solely by golems and other ancient constructs. So our changeling, on their journey, stumbled upon Arak Yor and was befriended and assisted by a golem, an ancient golem that helped them navigate the Underdark the rest of the way from Arak Yor to Stormreach. Fill in a few more proper nouns, and you've got yourself a pretty compelling backstory for a magic item. that the players can learn and investigate further, or it can just be like a really cool, oh, that's a sick story. Anyway, back to my deal. Now, if you want to play it safer, you can just roll 4 times and then slot the entries you get into the spots that make the most sense. So in this instance, the first one would be a Korvar adventurer that was using the weapon to fight creatures from Khyber in Sarlona with the assistance of House Thorani. Not as compelling or crazy or wild, but still could be a really interesting story. The first 2 levels require only 1 random table, and you can get a lot of mileage out of that. In fact, that is the primary way that I use randomness to inject meaning into the magic items in my story. This last level, I kind of do when I'm really stuck and I really can't even come up with a compelling narrative from the 4 options that I roll. And that's where we take a look at the Mythic GM Emulator. So this book has gained a lot of fame as an engine to use any TTRPG system to run a solo game or a game without a game master. But I prefer to use it for the collection of random tables in the back of the book, shocking absolutely no one, to help me break through any writer's block that I may encounter. So let's say I'm working on a side quest for one of my player characters. They had an elder sibling that was an adventurer before them, but they went on a quest and was never heard from again. And the player character is determined to figure out what happened to their older sibling. But I'm just sitting there staring at my journal, unable to come up with anything. So let's make an item that serves as a clue for the identity of one of the siblings' adventuring companions. Let's say this is pretty early on in the campaign, so I don't want to give away a whole lot of information about the sibling themselves, but rather just something adjacent to them. So same thing, 4 rolls. With an 85, we get the Shadow, which is the dark god of ambition and dark magic. So that is who the siblings' companion worshipped. They were a member of the Shadow's followers. Interesting. 29, Eberron, the progenitor dragon of the world, is the enemy that they're fighting. Okay. 59 is Margul, which is an infamous bugbear raiding band that live in the Seawall Mountains. And then lastly, 87, the spirits of the past, which are spiritual anchors of the greatest champions of the Ternadal elves. So I have a worshiper of the Shadow who had a beef with a cult dedicated to Eberron, and they fought in a stronghold in the Seawall Mountains and were surprisingly assisted by the spirits of the past. So that, could be enough if I'm feeling especially creatively fulfilled in that moment to then spring off of and create a story like we just did. But let's get Mythic involved to try and help me come up with some interesting ideas for how to make this story unique and kind of outside of my own voice, because this is going to force me to get one step further removed from what I would just do as a default. So Mythic has tables known as meaning tables. These provide actions, descriptions, and can define various elements within your game. These are not clear cut and do require some interpretation on your part, but they do provide a fantastic starting point if you're feeling stuck. So let's ask ourselves, why was a follower of the Shadow and our player's sibling fighting this cult dedicated to Eberron? Well, we can look to the meaning actions table in the back of the Mythic book and roll twice, and we get an 83, which is start. And then on the second action table, so the way these work is generally the first table is like a verb, and the second one is a noun, so that you roll twice to get a complete sentence. So for this, we roll 83, which is start, and 68, peace. So they want to start peace. So, okay, so rather than fighting the cult, they approach them in an attempt to broker peace with them. But why? Why? What were the cults trying to do? Let's roll on meaning actions again. 23 continue and 88 support. So this cult is based within the Margul and the Seawall Mountains. So they were likely providing support to the marauders who also lived there with their magic. But we can use Mythic to define even what their support looked like. If I'm like, well, how the heck would a cult dedicated to Eberron help these bugbear raiders? So we'll use the meaning descriptions table in the back of Mythic to describe the nature of their support. So same thing, roll twice. The first one is 77 partially and 87 shocking. So the cult to the progenitor dragon of the world has begun using magic that can create very targeted lightning storms to assist the Margul in battle and in raids. And that's the nature of it, that this cult, and we can then start vibing with it, or we can even roll again about like, why were they helping them? In fact, I'm going to go off script right now. I don't have this in my script anywhere, why they were helping them. So I'm going to pull up my D100 roller online, and I have Mythic open. So I'm going to go to the meaning actions table again. I'm going to roll the first, which is a 14. So meaning actions, 14 block. And the second roll is another 14. Block comfort. So, okay, block comfort. So the cult was living in the Seawall Mountains. And if you get into like the history of Eberron, the bugbears came to the Seawall Mountains to establish their own stronghold as a way of getting away from the hobgoblin culture. And so the bugbears came there, but the cult was already there. And the bugbears basically told them, hey, we're going to drive you out of your homes. We're going to raid your villages. We're going to raid your headquarters, your hiding spot. And the cult had to offer to them, how about we use our magic to help you in your raids and you will leave us alone? And so they're helping them because the bugbears are blocking the comfort that they had prior to them arriving. That is an in real-time use case for what I'm talking about here. And now I have the question of, why did the spirits of the past help this character? So we can use the meaning elements table. So the elements table, there are a lot of different meaning elements table for different contexts. And you don't roll twice on these, you just roll once to get an idea of what's going on. And so I'm going to pick the character motivations element table, and I'll roll on that just once and get a 67. Object. So there's something about either the storms that the cult is creating or the end goals of the Margul that have brought the spirits of the past into this because they object to what is happening. Also understand that that is just certain emphasis. It could also be object. Like if there is an object that the adventurer found that allows them to tap into the power of the spirits of the past, that's also perfectly fine. I just kind of chose to go with object because that to me was the more interesting option. But I could keep going. I could further flesh out the story either by continuing to roll, or once I feel like I have enough, then start using my own creativity to build off of it and create a really compelling story for this like tertiary character, because it is the companion of a sibling of a player character. But this literally took me so little time to actually do, because I just rolled 4 times and then rolled on some additional tables as much as I needed to. And I wasn't having to use my brain that much, but I was certainly having to use it more than writing in a AI generator, make me a backstory. So let me know what you think. Do you make a lot of use of AI in your games, or do you tend to use tools like this to get your own creative juices flowing? Let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts on all of that are. And be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you next time.